Well, yeah, and then going back to Christine McVie, one of her, I've been, of course, going back over old songs, and from Bare Trees, there's a song called "Homeward Bound." That's her own song, where she's just saying, "I want to sit at home in my rocking chair. I don't want to travel the world. As far as I'm concerned, I've had my share, but time's more precious than gold." This was in 1972. She wrote that.
Well, that was what was so funny is when I remember talking. I didn't talk to her about when she left, but I talked to Stevie about it quite a bit, and I think to Lindsay a fair amount. And they basically said, like, she just wanted to go sit in her garden. She had enough. And I thought it was actually amazing. Especially now, if you look at the arc of it, I'm glad that she got to come back. I'm sorry that the whole chain was broken at that point, because I don't think there was, I think even like a year or two ago, it felt like maybe something in the air that the original lineup would come together. What's weird is I love Neil Finn. He's one of my favorites. I just always felt weird about that being Fleetwood Mac. It's sort of like, it's interesting with bands where you can pull a few switches. It's weird. Every band is unique. I feel in a weird way when Bill Berry left REM, it wasn't quite REM, and that's the drummer,
Yeah, it wasn't. It was not. It should have been. I always felt it should have been a different name. I mean,
it just was weird. And even the Heartbreakers, Stan Lynch, who drove Tom crazy, there was a weird relationship there, and they got in a great drummer, but it felt to me not quite
right.
And maybe that it's interesting because maybe that's only old people projecting onto these groups, because now it's like Pantera's going out and it's like, aren't they dead? It's like, well, no, as long as there's, we got the lead singer and the accountant's nephew, and that was something I learned. My first concert, some of them were going with my parents to Miami Beach, at the Fontainebleau and the Eden Rock, these great old hotels in Miami Beach. But back then they would, and the Newporter was one, they would have bands, they'd say, and I'm like a little 10-year-old obsessed with music history, and they'd say the Drifters here, the Platters. And then you would go and it was like, these guys are like 25.
Yeah, right.
These are not the Drifters. Well, and it's like a franchise.
Menudo.
Yeah. Or like, well, we went to the 80s live show. You see.
Oh, I listened to that.
Oh,
now, okay. Now, the manager, was it
Rob Juarez?
Rob Juarez was the promoter, and
he created the whole concept. Is that who you're talking about?
Who was good and who was not good?
I loved Wang Chung. I thought it was the two.
You mean who the artists who were good? Oh yeah. They were great.
I really did like Wang. As I mentioned, I thought they kind of stretched out their songs a little bit. I always loved How to Live and Die in LA. I thought that was always a brilliant song, and they did the whole soundtrack for that. Super talented. The others were fun. They're fine. It wasn't, it was kind of like being in Branson, Missouri a little bit, and but still good and still fun to hear the songs.
Fun to hear the songs. Are you saying this by way, because we've talked about this a lot, how the artists are not it's the artist, the singer, like Annabella from Bow Wow Wow. It's not, the band Bow Wow Wow. It's Annabella.
Right. Missing Persons. Dale from
this is a point of contention in my house. He's angry. He hates that Dale calls them Missing Persons because he's a big Terry Bozzio fan. He's a drummer. So, but she's with musicians. She's not missing. I mean, she's Dale Bozzio.
But it's super weird how it's so case by case. You can't even come up with the right rule, because I have seen. Like I went to see Martha Davies or whatever
in the
motels
in
some venue in New York. And it was like, and she had just gotten back one guy who had been in the band, and it felt like the motels. And she sang great. And I'm like, okay, I'm buying this 100%. I happen to love The Fifth Dimension. And one day right before the pandemic, maybe the week or two before the pandemic, I saw The Association, which is literally like two guys, one of the sons of one of the guys and the brother of somebody. And it was great. And they actually had one of the original guys came to sit in like the third row, and there's no one there. There's like few hundred people there and me. And I'm like, I'm so okay. That's my bucket list. Like see every
Yeah.
group I ever liked. But then I went to see the Fifth Dimension, the same place, like a couple days later. And I loved the Fifth Dimension. And it was terrible because there's only one woman left and she's not one who ever sang lead. So it's like,
Yeah.
it felt like you were on a cruise ship. But during the pandemic, I convinced my wife I think we went to 2 shows in that first year when there were shows. Harry Styles, because we're both in love with him, let me be honest.
Yeah.
But also
Agree.
went to see Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis
Oh, nice.
with the Pasadena Symphony Orchestra outside. And it was great because that was like, oh yeah, those are the voices
Yeah.
you remember.
For sure. We saw the Smithereens with Marshall Crenshaw.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Was Robin Wilson at that one? or
No, he
just
was
Marshall?
not. They pick and I like
Yeah.
that. I like that both of them. I mean, they're both fans of the Smithereens.
I love
and,
all of them.
yeah, and it was a great show. It's still that
was-
Smithereens energy. You know, it's the band. It's the 3 guys. Actually, no, it was just 2 of the guys.
No, well, it was Dennis and no, it was
No, the bass player was one of them. It was 2 of the original Smithereens, but it was still.
that was absolutely the Smithereen. They said they were.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have questioned anything except not.
It was
Pat Denizio.
It was very good. They brought it was like they were like when we talked to them. It was like they still feel like they're the Who jamming in their garage, and they bring that energy. It was I enjoyed it a lot.
It is definitely case by case. You're right about that because you have seen, plenty of bands that have switched out members. And by the way, I'm sure that this is something you never expected to hear me say, but you made that point about Neil Finn. I would watch Neil Finn open a can of soda. I love him so much. But he was great. I saw the show. I saw the Fleetwood Mac show with him. And he was great. But it absolutely and you can't say, I wouldn't say it isn't Fleetwood Mac, but there's a definite distinction,
Listen, I saw Fleetwood Mac. The first time I ever saw them was not until when Lindsay left right after Tango in the Night. I went to review them when they had was it Billy Burnett?
Billy Burnett,
and Rick
yeah.
Vito, I think.
Yeah,
And it was, and by the way, it was interesting because I went back to the dressing room after and they had like 5 different managers and 5 publicists and the vibe wasn't right. It's just like, it is an emotional decision I think you make when you see something. It's like, oh, that's what I wanted to see, or that's what I need, or it's not. And it's like, it's interesting. Like the Eagles, it's like, they don't have to like each other, but there's something about the act of sharing the stage.
sure.
Yeah.
And like, with Stevie and Lindsay, one of my favorite records of all times is Buckingham Nicks, the record they
Oh,
made
is that right?
before it. And I would just I pitched both of them. And I think at one point they were even discussing it, like, just do a tour, the 2 of you, and do the Buckingham Nicks stuff and do some other stuff. And that would have been so great. But yeah, it's complicated. Like, I've been in backstage with the Eagles where my wife and I went backstage once early in the reunion, and Don Henley goes like, don't leave. Like, we got up to like, well, we don't want to be in the way because, this was before the show. And he goes, don't leave. He goes, I like you guys. I don't like that many people.
Don't leave me alone with the others.
Yeah.
Leave me alone with the Eagles.
As you mentioned, you hate interviewing 2 people. The Eagles documentary, which I love, they never have 2 guys interviewing. It's just them separate because they all have their own agenda. And I love that. That's my favorite.
I interviewed Fagan a few times, but only Steely Dan interview I ever did was on their last record, or one of the last records they did. I interviewed the 2 of them, and it was so tough because they were the opposite of the groups who hate each other. They sort of, at that point, they were such a unit that they made you feel so uncool and
really?
excluded. And I think it's because they were just awkward interviews.
Yeah.
It was and it's like a group I love so much. And then after I later interviewed Fagan by himself, and it was great. It just was just.
It's just getting them.
Yeah.
Did you ever try and interview the Beastie Boys? Because I always felt like that same energy, like they had like this connection, and you just could not get a serious answer out of them. It's just,
they were my first pandemic Zoom interview.
All right.
They asked me to write the like official Apple media interview for the documentary.
Okay. Oh, so this was So okay.
But it was literally the first week of the pandemic, and I didn't. They said, "Can we do it by Zoom?" And it's like, "What's Zoom?"
Yeah.
And I think about that. I just did 5 million Zooms this last week, but the first one I ever
Was the
did
basic-
was in my
was the-
bedroom, hiding, looking for someplace quiet. And my wife goes, she goes, "Oh, I can't work in this house." They're like talking to friggin' Beastie Boys, and they were a little bit. They were so, there's only obviously the two.
You're right.
But they were so, they were great. But it was like trying to herd cats. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
They were so cool. Like one of them was like walking out to his barbecue and like ignoring,
Well,
it was
yeah.
so cool.
Well, that's what every interview I used to see with them. It was like herding cat, especially when they had that 20-year-old energy and they were just like bouncing off the walls and you just like, would you guys just focus?
I caught the 40 or 50-year-old, it must have been the
Yeah.
50-year-old energy.
Yeah,
version
sure.
of
That's
that.
the best time to catch.
Yes. It was fun. It was fun. And I love that documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. I thought it was great.